And happy post-Valentine's Day, Xavier Muskie fans. This is your weekly Razorcast. That's Reaker and Zink, talking about all things Musketeer basketball. And this is the week everybody has been waiting for a long, long time, not just because it's Valentine's Day, not just because pitchers and catchers report today, but we all know what's happening on Saturday. But before we get Jim too jittery, because I know he's got a lot to talk about there, in terms of Saturday's beatdown, we got some other things to talk about from the past week. But before we get to that, we'll say hi to Jimmy the Reek, the big prognosticator. How's it going, Mr. Reeker?
Oh, blissfully tired this morning. Had a late one last night. Didn't make it home till near midnight. But
oh my God,
all is well. Musketeers 24-3, 12-2 in the Big East. Game and a half lead. We didn't think we'd be saying that this morning. Fourth in the AP and coaches poll, highest ever in Xavier Musketeer history. First in the Big East, second in the country in RPI, 9 in a row. We've been to the top of the mountain. We see the promised land, but we're not there yet, Jeff.
That's exactly what I was going to say there. Be careful there. Don't go jumping into getting down those steps, or I'll make you go back to bed before Christmas can come. You get back there and wait for Santa Claus to come. Lots of season left. There are still 4 big East games, and we'll talk about the big one here in a little bit. And, of course, the Big East tournament before we get to the big dance, which will start in the middle of March. So let's go backwards a little bit. I know everybody out there saying, come on, we got to talk about Nova, we got to talk about Nova, we got to talk about Nova. It's not what we do here. We will. But we got to go back to a couple of games that, people may have already forgotten about looking ahead to Saturday. But let's go back to Omaha and last Saturday in a game that was exciting all the way down and, of course, had its controversy there at the end, but a big win away at Creighton.
Yeah, that was it just kind of typifies this team. You just never know who's going to step up and who's going to make the big play. And there's really an option of 9 that can do that. And, of course, on that day, Quentin Gooden really stepped up, and he has really stepped up his game in the last 2 or 3 weeks, knocking down 3-pointers at a almost record pace. He's hardly missed any, I would say, in the last 3 weeks. But, yeah, the play at the end, controversial, but not that controversial. I mean, you can't look at that play and say there was no foul there. There was contact. There's maybe 2 or 3 different things that could have been called. Of course, the one that we needed to be called was called. But you got to go back just, the play before that and the foul on the 3-point shot on Creighton. I guess he did touch his non-shooting arm. Obviously, he took a dive to alert the officials that he'd been touched, and so would have been a tough way to lose that game. So, but I don't know. Jeff, it might just be destiny. You know how sometimes those teams, you just have those years where everything goes your way and you don't know how they're going to get out of this one, but somehow they do. Musketeers are writing a great story. I mean, and again, one of the toughest places in America to win, and they did it actually 2 years in a row. They actually had a big win out there last year after Trayvon Blewett came back from that injury when they were just scraping to try to make it into the NCAA tournament.
Well, I'll let you live up on your cloud because I don't want to burst your bubble, but I'm here to be the devil's advocate. A couple of things I say there. First of all, I agree with you. At the end of the game, and I watched it, and I thought it was a foul right away, listening to the announcer say, according to the rule book, I guess you can be moving as long as you don't initiate the contact. They were saying that Gooden initiated the contact, so it shouldn't have been a foul. It doesn't matter because I look at both of those fouls, and if they're called with 10 minutes left, nobody blinks an eye.
Right.
They just go, and so I'm glad that the same thing held court, that the Zebras are calling the same thing at the end of the game as they would have in the middle of the game. It's just too bad that it came down to free throws, but very exciting there, and great to knock the Blue Jays off their home record. They were undefeated, and now it leaves only the Muskies hold court at home through the Big East season. But a couple of things about it that concern me. It might be a team of destiny, and there's a couple of things that go into it. One is that I believe that was their 8th win with less than a 6-point differential, and you hope that destiny continues. But that's also one of those things that you could be 8-0, you could be 0-8, you could be 4-4 in those games. They can go either way. When it comes to tournament time, if one of those games doesn't tip your way, you're in a little bit of trouble. And the other thing that was a little off on that game, and part of it was due to the Creighton defenses, the 3-point shooting down under 60%. But you're right. The Muskies found a way to win, and that's what's important.
Yeah, and they found a way to win despite the fact that Trayvon Blewett only scored 6 points. I think that was his low for the year. First time in how many games, I don't know, that he hadn't put up double digits. And he was asked a little bit about it last night in his press conference after the Seton Hall game, and he said, here's the deal. They had a good game plan to take me away, and they did that. He said Kyrie Thomas played great defense on me. I didn't have that many opportunities. But, again, you look to, other guys stepped up, along with Quentin Gooden, who, again, he had to knock down 2 free throws with 17,000 people yelling at him, and that, can't be the easiest thing in the world. But also, you had Sean O'Mara and Karam Cantor combined for 26 points and 8 rebounds in that game, which was big. And, again, there was a point of that game as I watched it, I think in the first half, they had edged out to a 10-point lead, and you were hoping that they could just keep building on that and it not even be close at the end. But, again, they give the Blue Jays credit. Their crowd got them back into the game. They made some big plays. Marcus Foster made some unbelievable shots. He ended up with 29 points, and he's an unbelievable shooter and great player. So, at the end of the day, it seems like all year long we've been saying at the end of the day they won, and that's the most important thing.
Mm-hmm. And we'll talk a little bit later about what that may mean to Creighton. Last year we got, 7 teams in the big dance, was it? And
7, yeah.
7
in the 7th.
And it might be a little shakier this year. A lot of good records out there beating up on each other, but that's something we'll talk about in a little bit. A big win on the road that they had to have, and then of course last night's game against Seton Hall, I thought it was great. They came out hot. They put it to them. They weren't caught looking ahead like they did the last time when they dropped the game to Providence, a team we'll talk about here in a little bit and what they did last night. But a stellar effort to put the foot on the pedal and just not let it up last night against the Pirates.
Well, and the big concern, and if you're reading the bulletin boards or listening to the fans, is now not taking away from the win, that the more talking about what happened in the second half, because I on my way home last night I started thinking about it. I thought the score was 45-25 at halftime. Yep. They held them to 25 points. I thought I did some quick math, and I said they scored 65 points in the second half. And actually outscored the Musketeers, I think, by 8. I think the second half would have been 65-57 or something like that, which has to be a concern. A team scoring 65. I mean, if you give that up both halves, you're going to give up 130 points. That's not good. But I think part of it, well, here was something that was said. This has kind of been discussed. The question was asked of Trayvon Blewett in the press conference last night, and we can talk about this a little bit as we move forward. Did you know that Villanova had lost to Providence? And he looked at him kind of sheepishly, and he said, yeah, one of the student managers said something at halftime that the Wildcats had been beaten, which I figured they didn't know before the game because we were actually at the little Norwood Cafe in the corner of the Centos Center watching that game near the end. So I'm thinking it ended, how it was. It was actually on TV. It was back-to-back games on FS1, and so there was maybe a 10-minute lag between the end of that game and the beginning of the Musketeers game. Thought, well, they obviously didn't know in the first half, I don't think, but he did admit that they did know going out in the second half. What effect did that have? I don't know. 20-point lead, and they've lost, and now you start thinking, wow, if we can win on Saturday, we're going to have a 2-game lead with 3 to go, and our dream and what we've worked for and what we've thought about is right there. I think it may have had a bit of an effect on how they played that second half. And again, they at one point in the second half they had them down by 25 points. And in fact, I thought a major thing in there kind of surprised me, and it played out kind of strange that when they got down by 25 points. And I did a little searching. I think I got this because I couldn't understand. I kept saying, I don't know why Angel Delgado's not in the game. Actually, him and Kadeem Carrington both were out of the game for major minutes. But it comes down to he has been nursing a knee injury. And basically Kevin Willard decided when they got down 25 points, I think that he decided to get him off the floor and give him some rest, that this one was maybe unsalvageable, and he needed to think about the future because obviously they're going to have to win some games down the road to make the NCAA tournament themselves. But the strange twist was that his replacement, and this is a name this guy's probably going to be their stud next year inside, Sandro Mamakalashvili. He's from somewhere in Eastern Europe, 6'10" freshman. Well, when he was inserted in the game, he scored 17 points, and I looked at his log for the season. He'd only had one other double-digit game. That was a non-conference game early on against a lesser opponent. He scored 11. So he gave the Musketeers fits, and they were within 6 points with 3:35 remaining in the game. It was not a done deal.
Now, but again, they found a way. A couple things that I'd say about what you just commented on in the previous one. First of all, Trayvon was back, 37 points, led them through it, 13 for 13 from the free throw line. That's amazing, and that's how he eats you up. The three-pointing was back almost 50% from three-point. Different style of team. Those are the positives. Like I said, when you're up 25, it's hard to maintain that intensity. But you also don't have to play the full game. On one aspect is the other team's got to come to you. And, I got down to 6, but ended up at 12. My concern is, and this is something I brought up a couple of weeks ago, the number of points that the Muskies are having to score in order to win. 102 last night, 98 against Butler, 96 against Georgetown. Of course, that was a couple of OT games. 92 against Creighton the first time, 88. And it's great that the offense is there. But we've often said, offense wins games, defense wins championships. And the one weak link so far is getting better, but still not quite there, is what you're talking about. Shutting down that other team at key times, not the last couple of minutes like we're talking about where the heroics come, but so that you don't have to get to those last second heroics. And that has been a weakness that could come to haunt them in the next month or so.
Yeah, you know what? I totally agree with you. That very rarely happens. But on the other side, I think it's just, here's what we got to look at, that this is the identity of this team, that they can score points and they can score points in bunches. So there is concern, I guess, to look optimistically at it. We know that that has been their tradition. Xavier's tradition is playing great defense and keeping themselves in games and winning games that way. And we know it's going to be a continued focus going in. Chris Mack, again, that whole philosophy kind of comes from him, and talking about the pack line defense and the way they play it and how they've been so successful. So we know, it's not something like they're blowing off and saying don't worry, we'll always outscore. And you are right. There's going to be nights that the shots aren't falling, and you're going to have to play defense to win a game. So that is a concern, but I guess we got to be worried. I read somewhere somebody within the last week said, if you're complaining about the wins, what does that say about your program and where you are right now? So,
well, good problem to have. But now what we're talking about is we're not talking about the typical. The Muskies are great. They're one of the top 50 programs in the country. As we've been talking about all year, and you who have always said, one game at a time, in the past couple weeks looking further and further ahead. Now we're talking about a team the level of championships. And yes, we're not complaining about the victories, but we want to know what it's going to take to jump that next level. Can we get where Mark Few and Gonzaga hadn't been for so long and were able to make last year? Can we topple Villanova off of that Big East pedestal? So you got to look at you want to enjoy the victories. There's no doubt about it. But, of course, you got another game coming.
Yeah, and just to follow up a little bit on that whole thought process, here's the concern that I've read a little bit about, but I actually have this concern. It's happened, is it seems to be that we accomplish our focus. We control the scorer, who's oftentimes the leading scorer and the one that can beat you, but it's the unsung guy. 4 or 5 times this year, guys who you don't even know their name, or like last night you can't even pronounce their name, end up with career nights. That's happened a few times. It's like we take care of the stars and the guys that we're worried about and we've prepared for, but maybe it's not a complete defense. It's usually a guy that's, again, sometimes off the bench or somebody who doesn't score a whole lot who goes off. So I think that's got to be the focus, that it's got to be more of a team effort. Najee Marshall is just an unbelievable defender and is usually getting the assignment of their best scorer, especially if he's a kind of a big shooting guard. And the big guys, of course, have done a great job of shutting down. If there are, we don't see a whole lot of big post players, especially in the Big East this year. But when we have gone against them, again, Angel Delgado, he only played 22 minutes last night, and he only had 6 points. I think, I didn't check, but that might be his worst offensive performance of the night. And, again, he didn't play the entire game. And you got to look at his replacements, his stats, too, because he did have 17 points in the game. So, I'm with you there. You're making valid points. But, again, the point that I like to make is that they can't do that to us in the fact that it's 1 of 9 or 2 of 9, and it's not the same 9. In fact, here's a comparison. Creighton, Blewett scores 6 points. Cantor scores 14. We win. Last night, Blewett scores 37 points. Cantor doesn't score a point at all, and we win. It's just pick your poison, I guess. That's and JP, a lot of people have been concerned about him, and he had 8 points last night. But listen to this line. And again, I think JP, some people say, he might have been down. He had 5 rebounds. He had 5 assists. He had 3 steals, and he was 3 for 5 in shooting field goals. So he was shooting 60% on the night, even though he scored 8 points. And here's another, I have to pull this up. I did have this pulled up, their stats. Listen to this. This is just, if you're preparing for this team, this has got to be scary. Leading scorer, 19 points. McCura, 12. Cantor, 10. And then you go Gooden, 8. Marshall, 8. Jones, 8. Gates, 8. O'Mara, 7. Who do you defend? Who do you focus on? How do you stop that? That's the positive going forward.
Well, as I said, they're putting the points on the board. We know that, and we've gone long enough. I tried to lead you into Villanova there, and you want to get into the stats, which is great for people to hear. But let's talk about this. Everything is waiting. It's Saturday. It's time. Nova's coming in. First, we got to talk about their stumbles and what that might mean. They've lost 2 of their last 3. A big surprise from St. John's. Then they went to Hinkle and pretty much beat up on the Bulldogs. But then last night couldn't get the 3-pointer going, and they lose to Providence, which, we can't gloat too much about because that's a team that took us down earlier in the year as well.
And I did, again, I watched a lot of that game, and un-Villanova-like was that they just not were hitting shots. They were not, I think at one point they had late in the second half, they'd only hit 1 3-pointer. Jalen Brunson was missing some shots that he usually doesn't miss. And again, they've dealt with some injuries. Booth is out, I believe, for the season. Pascal was back last night, but again, he's coming off a concussion, and I saw him miss some shots that he usually doesn't. And then Omari Spellman, the big, I think he's a freshman, actually has a broken bone in his face. He's playing, but with a major ski mask, and I actually saw him miss at least 4 free throws last night. I'm sure that mask that he's probably going to have to wear the rest of the year because, again, they said he broke a cheekbone last Saturday. Actually, one of his own players, Steven Senzo, actually elbowed him underneath the basket, and that is where the injury came from. So, but what it I think shows is it's just the Big East, and again, we can talk about the Big East a little bit. Yeah, they're kind of cannibalizing themselves. You got St. John's and DePaul and Georgetown starting to win some games and starting to get some of those mid-range teams that we thought were going to be in the tournament have to start looking at. If they don't have a winning record in the regular season of the Big East, they might not get that invite. A lot of people think you got to have at least a 500 record in your conference play to make the big tournament. So it's a big game. It's number 3 in the country against number 4 in the country. It's 2 early show number 1 seeds. It's probably the biggest regular season game ever in Xavier history, and it's going to be a challenge. The thing I like is I don't think they'll go to sleep on Villanova with any lead. I got to think you're going to get a 40-minute performance. They know they're going to have to play 40 minutes. They know that no lead is going to be safe. But we got them at the Cintas Center. The sixth man will be. I'm sure it'll be loud in there.
Well, you bring up a great point in that it will be home court advantage. A couple things I throw out is one, we've talked about this on the past few. I wish Villanova was coming in without that blemish. You want it to be, it's still going to be for the top. Villanova basically has to win this game if they want to continue their run on top of the Big East. Xavier really wants to win it to break that schneid, and then they'll just have, if they win it, they're going to have a 2.5 game lead with 3 to play, which means they're probably not in the schedule really favors the Muskies. So we can go from there. You want it to be that, but one fear is this, that the last time they played, you talk about getting a lead and stepping on it, Villanova was coming off a loss at Butler. They did have a win at Marquette in between there, and everybody thought they might be vulnerable, and they just put it to it. You talk about getting a lead and holding it. They didn't let us do that in Philadelphia. They came out hot and got on it, and they're going to play with a chip on their shoulder. But I think one of the big things that you've hit on, which is important, and they've talked about Villanova all year, is their lack of depth. They don't have the depth that the Muskies have, and they are hurting right now, and that's contributing to those shooting woes. This is a team that, shot basically 50% from three-point land on their way to their NCAA title. But the other thing is, when you got a wounded Wildcat in the corner, they come out fighting. So we've got to watch that, and we can't get too hyped up about it. Got to play our game. And the one thing I say is the reports are now that Booth will probably be back by the NCAA tournament, they think. But, of course, with a hand injury, you never know how it's going to go, but that's not going to affect the games that we have. So matchups, you hit it on. We got to get up and do that. We got to have the full team effort there. But what do we got to worry about Nova coming out and doing that might derail that?
Oh, shooting the lights out, which they can. They got so many guys that can just light it up. I want to go back to, there was an interesting discussion in the Norwood Cafe last night. I had it maybe 5 times, as many people were sitting there watching Villanova get down at 1 point, 10 points, 8 points, and as the game came to an end, and it appeared that they may lose it, and this is your line of thinking. I know you go along with this. You'd have been saying the same thing. I really didn't want Villanova to lose tonight, and two reasons. I wanted them, not to be coming off that loss because, number one, they're gonna want this game now more. They're gonna be a wounded animal, and I've stood on the other side. I said, no, you want Villanova to lose every time they play. We got to have every advantage. That extra game, we need that. And I said, plus, people were alluding to, well, the game won't be that big of a game on Saturday if they lose tonight. No. And I said, yes, it will, because basically now the thinking is, and I heard Blewett and Mac both say it last night in their interviews, is, you're looking at, and you pretty much said it too, you're playing for the Big East Championship on Saturday. You win that game, and it won't be clinched, but you're right there, and it's going to be very, very tough for the Musketeers to allow the Wildcats to, they'd basically have to go 4-0, and Musketeers go 0-3 to lose it, and they'd have to win one game, I think, just to keep it tied, and 2 games of those last 3 would give it to them outright. No, I'm not of that thinking. Anytime we get an advantage, and and if they happen to lose it, and then you got to look at they're still tied, and so you still got the chance to still win it outright, or even play for the tie, the championship, the co-champion. So I know you think differently about that, and many Musketeer fans think differently about that. But again, I'm the one that take advantage of everything you have, and thank you, Providence. And Providence is a tough team.
You want my view is if you want the team to be at the top when you beat them. You want them in their best shape. I agree with you. You want them to lose so we can win the Big East Championship. But it still comes down to this: whether Villanova would have lost last night or not, Xavier has to win on Saturday to make this happen. And going down the stretch, the schedule favors the Muskies. They only have 3 games, whereas Nova has 4. And we've got Georgetown, Providence at home, and DePaul. Georgetown and DePaul both on the road. Whereas the Wildcats, they have DePaul at home, but they have to travel to Creighton and Seton Hall. That gauntlet that the Xavier just got through, and then they finish with Georgetown at home. So, Providence once versus Creighton and Seton Hall on the other side. It certainly favors the Muskies. But again, even if they would backdoor it, if somebody else would beat Villanova, you want to win it. You don't want somebody else to lose it, and that's why Saturday is so important. They want to go to 13-2 in the league, and they want Villanova to be 10-4. And then, maybe be a little off your prediction. You've always been saying somebody's going to have 3 or 4 losses. If Xavier can run the table, they'll only have 2. But it's going to be an exciting game. 4:30 on the Fox network. Could be part of national TV as they were last week. And it's going to be a fun game. Like you said, Cintas is going to be rocking. And that's what you want. And right now, as you were talking on the Trodcast the other day, it's an exciting time to be in Cincinnati and be a college basketball fan. We got the Muskies at 4. We got the Bearcats at 5. We got Northern Kentucky and Wright State on top of the Horizon League. It's just a wonderful, wonderful time here in the doldrums of other major sports to be an NCAA fan.
Yeah, and here's something that would be of interest to me, and I'm sure it could be done, but I don't know if they'd want to do it. But here's my thought. I just wonder, because of the schedule, and I think there's a factor involved here that makes some sense, but I'd like to know how the scheduling process went down this year. Because if you look at Xavier's schedule, very, very balanced. I think only twice did they go on the road in consecutive games in the entire schedule. And again, I've been talking on the Trodcast and this also that, I looked at down the road and I saw Villanova had that 4 out of 5 game stretch were 4 on the road and all at maybe the 4 toughest places to play. talking Providence last night, Xavier on Saturday. Then they go to Creighton and Seton Hall, both yet. I can be a conspiracy theorist.
I was going to say, come on, Mel Gibson, let's not go too far.
Did the Big East say,
No.
Villanova's won this, and the conference would have a lot more interest if we gave another team a chance to knock them off their yeah. But
how many beers did you have last night?
Hey,
come on.
I'm not stupid. It's all about money, and it's about marketing, and I'm sure there's people. Here's what I think is probably the factor: the fact that Villanova shares their arena with 76ers, and probably the dates available that in that series of a couple weeks, the Sixers are probably, because I'm sure the way it probably goes down is Villanova has to wait till the NBA makes their schedule available. So
I can't agree with you. Come on.
I'd like to have the discussion with whoever. There is a group of people or one person who is responsible for. I'd like to know what the process was. I think that would just be an interesting insight. And
the process is very complicated. You got 10 schools and you got probably 15 different arenas because, like you say, they play in different places. Some of them at different times. And what else is going on campus? You can go back even. You wouldn't know this because you didn't grow up here. Years and years ago, the Royals fans thought that the owner didn't want to win in the NBA because he scheduled the circus to come into the Cincinnati Gardens during the playoffs, and the Royals had to play on the road when they shouldn't have played, and they had to play in Schmidt when they the field house. And the guy said, no, it's just fitting. I wasn't sure that the Royals were going to be in the playoffs, and I was going to make a lot more money off the circus. So you're right, money drives it, but I don't think there's any conspiracies here. I don't think they said, let's find a way to get the Wildcats out of there. You want your best teams up there, and this is where Xavier has it easy because they only have the one venue to deal with. But like you say,
they get to pretty much choose their dates. They probably say, hey, 7 days a week, it's men's basketball can have it, so let us know when you want people to come in.
But that's in some way where we're lucky. We don't have an NBA franchise to deal with. We don't even have a G League franchise to deal with. And the Cintas Center, when you look at it, that I forget the name of it now, that the little bandbox Villanova plays in on campus, it only holds, about 7,000-8,000. Hinkle only holds, I think, a little over 10. Some of these guys are still playing in those old places that are, harken back to the days like the UC Fieldhouse and Schmidt Fieldhouse where the fans were right on you. And in order to get those bigger crowds, Villanova has to play in the bigger venue. And that does make scheduling very complicated. I've mentioned it before. It's Major League Baseball, but it's kind of neat. This will tell you, and, of course, Major League Baseball is much more complicated. It's one of those 30 for 30s we always talk about on ESPN. It was a husband and wife accounting team who did Major League Baseball, and they did it on their kitchen table. This was before computers and before spreadsheets, and they had to do it by hand. And they talk about all the things that would go into it because you got to have same number of home games, and you got this coming in, and they need the venue for that. Let's see how the schedule works out next year. But I think this just happens. It's like this year, Xavier gets the second game at home. Last year they didn't. They flip-flopped those. It's not an easy thing to do. But it's going to be an exciting game. That's what's fun. We're rooting for the Muskies to pull it out. Hate to even say this because you don't want to think this way. In many ways, both of these teams are going to the tournament. Both of them will probably be no lower than a 3 seed, and that's if they discombobulate somehow. But as we've talked all year, for Muskie fans in particular, and this is where it's a little different for Villanova because they have that NCAA title with Jay Wright. For Muskie fans and Muskie players, they might put a little more focus on this because, you said we've been to the mountaintop and we've seen into the promised land. We're not quite to the mountaintop, but we're very close. We can see the top, and you want to get over that and get into that. But it's going to be a fun game between two great teams, two classy coaches, and we want that to be the focus. we'd love to stop there, but there's going to be more going on before we go because the Hoyas are right there.
Playing very well.
Yeah, that's coming up. They're playing very well, and it is a bit dangerous because this is a team that took us to overtime just a little over a week ago, and now we have to go to D.C. So win or lose, this could be one of those classic trap games that you can't get caught into. If we win coming in on a high against a team that almost beat us at home and surprised us, and if you lose, you might be a little down and go, oh, what happened? So you got to watch for Patrick Ewing and the Hoyas, and let's face it, they're not playing to get in the dance. They are at 15-10, 5-9. They're not going to go to the NCAA. So clipping off one of these big guys in the Big East might just be the exclamation point for their season, and they'll be a little more hyped.
Yeah, and you bring up something, and I wanted to mention that because we've talked about it on both of our broadcasts, but give Patrick Ewing all the kudos in the world. He has exceeded expectations. It's just great to see him to get this opportunity. I think he gets this because he was a big man. He gets this. I don't know. He can't coach, but I was listening to a show yesterday. They were talking about this very thing, and some people said, "What are they doing, giving him this job?" and blah blah blah. And the one guy made the point. He said, "This guy, was on an NBA bench for 14 years. I think he knows his basketball." Now, again, we don't know his personality, but every time I hear him speak, I'm very impressed with his knowledge and the way he approaches things. And again, he deserves a lot of credit. He got hammered for his non-conference schedule, but again, being a coach through the years myself, I know sometimes you got to do that in order to build confidence when you're trying to build a program. You got to start winning. Just winning, doesn't matter who you're playing. You got to learn how to win, so to speak, before you can start trying to defeat some of the big boys or girls or whatever in your league. And so I give him kudos, him and Mullins both. St. John's kind of done the same thing. They won again last night. They won 4 in a row. And I think what both those programs are playing for is maybe a little bit better seed in the tournament, although it's going to be very difficult to get out of that range of the tournament where they're going to have to play 4 games to win it. But I think that's what they're playing for, and they're actually playing for the future, just to start to build confidence and prove themselves. I'm going to tell you right now, Georgetown, they're very, very young, and again, they're starting to come around. They're going to be probably picked in the top 3 or 4 of the Big East next year, I truly believe, and depending on what happens with Shamori Pons, you got to question whether he's going to be around the way that guy's been playing. There's going to be an NBA. I think he's going to be drafted. He's just too good. So,
you said the Johnnies were the team.
Around.
Yeah. The Johnnies, and you're talking about Shamori Pons there. That was a team I thought would do better. Now that they're showing it now late in the season with their wins. This Georgetown team, you look at their past couple of weeks. I mean, they took the Muskies to overtime in Cintas. They barely lost to Providence. They'd beaten Seton Hall and Butler back-to-back, and Butler in Hinkle. So, and they don't have to play this weekend. They don't have a game. So they're going to be rested, relaxed, and refreshed. So you just hope that the Muskies don't have that letdown and can continue on to do the things that are going to get them to the top of that Big East. Of course, we're going to know more next week when we talk about that on the next Trogcast. And then, the Muskies don't have a game next Saturday, so it'll be pretty much easing into the end of the year. And we hope that when we're talking about that they are 14-2 and with at least a 2-game lead going into those last couple of games. But it's exciting time to be a Muskie fan. It's always exciting down there at Cintas, but to be at the top of the basketball world and talk about a number 1 seed, you just want the season to keep going.
Oh, yeah, just enjoy it. You know, when you think about this and you long for this, and this has been the goal, especially with this program, you know, as many people talk about, it's just been a steady rise, you know, reaching one plateau after another and not coming fast. It wasn't like a 5-year plan. It's been a 35-year plan, and it keeps, getting better. And in fact, reading a lot of the boards this week, a lot of people talking about their first experience with the Musketeers. You got guys going back and telling stories about the Schmidt Fieldhouse in the 1960s and how bad sometimes they were, and a lot of them talked about Marquette coming in here, and Marquette always being a national power and usually putting it on the Musketeers. And a lot of people, do I have to pinch myself? This is so surreal. It's what they've dreamed about for years and years. And remember, we talked with Dale Harmon last year. This program was on the verge of becoming a Division III program. There were many people on campus who wanted to de-emphasize athletics, and obviously the decision was made not to do that and to make the basketball program the focus. And it has all worked out in the end after a lot of hard work and many people involved that they have brought the national attention they were seeking through the basketball program. So you got to enjoy it, though. You almost just want it to slow down, because a lot of times when you're having a good season, it seems like it just goes too fast.
And that is like our show. It's gone too fast, but it's that time we're going to tune in to the game 4:30 on the Fox Network if you're not down in Cintas itself. And we'll be back on Tuesday with our Trogcast, and I'm sure the Nova and Xavier game will be a part of that, considering that's a number 3 versus a number 4 on the national scale. But let's wrap it up here with our trivia tidbits.
Well, my trivia is always try to tie it a little bit of what we're talking about, and just what we're talking about. It made me think last night as we had some downtime waiting for the game. Oh, I didn't mention I did get my bobblehead. So I am right here on my desk. I am looking at Joe Sunderman and Byron Larkin, my heroes. But so I was telling a story, and I couldn't quite put it together. I had to do a little bit of research, but I remembered, and this is going to lead into my trivia question. I took my oldest son, to a Xavier game because basically I couldn't find anybody else to go with me. Early on when I started attending games, I was a fan for probably 6-8 years before I even attended a game. Started watching them on TV when I started my program down there. Became my home team away from home at that point in my life. But anyway, I took my son to a game when they had just gone into the A10, and I tell the story that they were playing the number 1 team in the country, and who is also a member of the A10. And that's my trivia question for you, Jeff. And it was actually February 4th, 1996. And I'll give you a little bit of background. So I told the story. I said, my son was maybe 5 or 6. Well, doing the math, he was yet 4. He hadn't turned 5. So we go to this game, playing the number 1 team in the country. Got tickets. We were sitting in the Gardens. Gardens was sold out, packed. It was a raucous crowd. My 4-year-old son had to stand on the bleacher the entire game to see, because he was only 2 feet, whatever. But anyway, this game against this number 1 team, and obviously that's going to be the question, and you probably will get it very easily, but the game went into overtime. So at the end of regulation, the crowd's just going crazy. I think Xavier had a last shot. If it would have gone in, they would have won the game, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, at the end of regulation, my 4-year-old son, the place is going crazy. He turns at me and he says, "I got to go to the bathroom." Okay.
He wasn't alone.
Parental decision here. I said, okay, but we're running. And fortunately, if you remember the old Gardens, up in those corners, kind of where we're seated, there was like a small bathroom right around the corner. So we got to the bathroom, took care of business, got back. Unfortunately, the Musketeers didn't pull off the upset. They ended up losing that game 78-74. But my question for you, who was that number 1 team in the country that the Musketeers almost upset on February 4th, 1996?
My first guess would have to be St. Joe's, because wasn't that when they're on their hot era when they were in there that decade where they were so good and in the A10?
Yeah, this is a little bit before it. I'll give you a hint, and this will Marcus Camby was there.
UMass. Oh,
UMass.
Okay, yeah, there we go. Yeah.
So
right.
Again, I had to look that up, and again, he was only 4 years old. Obviously, I scarred him for life because again, he's a Marquette grad, and a Marquette alum, and a fan of the Golden Eagles. But I'm sure he would tell you that the Musketeers are still his number 2 team, because oftentimes after a big victory or something, he'll text me, and I know he's been watching the Musketeers when he has a chance. So I scarred him for life.
Well, those are things dads and sons do. They go to ball games and they go fishing, and those things. And I'm sure you probably tell him that story all the time, and he goes, "Dad, I have no idea what you're talking about. I was 4," but he enjoys watching you tell about it.
I actually haven't, but I will, in fact, allude to it. I think he listens to us quite often, so I'll have to ask him in the near future if he listened to this version and heard himself talked about a little bit, or maybe I'll just give him a cue. Hey, go listen to this show at the end where we talk about you.
That's it.
Great.
There's a prize at the end. Don't fast forward. All right, that's great stuff. Part of the history, the great history. You're going back over 20 years, so that'll tell you something. The guys that are playing for us right now weren't even around for that game. On a Troutcast the other day for my tidbits, we talked a little bit about players who'd won an NCAA title, an NBA title, and Olympic gold in my discussion of why basketball is a summer sport and not a winter sport in the Olympics. But with that in mind, and with pitchers and catchers reporting today for Major League Baseball spring training, I ask myself, has there ever been a player to win an NCAA basketball title and a World Series title? And
What? Oh, yeah.
To win?
Okay, that wouldn't be that bad. I was thinking you said NBA and MLB. That we know that wouldn't have happened, but NCAA.
Well,
okay, I'm with you.
That might not be as strange as you think. I'll have to research that, because a lot of players in the 40s and 50s played both.
You might be right.
So we'll have to get to that. But there is one.
NCAA and World
and a World Series title, and it wasn't from the era that I thought. I thought it would have happened more in those early years when guys did a lot more double duties. But it's Tim Stoddard, not a name. If you're a baseball man, that name would ring a bell a little bit. He pitched for 12 years. You know the name?
Oh, I thought you said Tim Stoddard.
I did say Tim Stoddard.
Did he play for North Carolina State?
He did.
That's where I remember him. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember his baseball career though.
That's it. He was part of that David Thompson-led North Carolina State Wolfpack team, which ended the great run of UCLA teams. And of course, that UCLA team had given them their only loss earlier in the year during the regular season, the 30-1 season, 74. Stoddard pitched for 12 years in the majors at a 41-35 record, 485 games, all as a right-handed reliever. He was on the roster for the 79 and 83 World Series with the Baltimore Orioles. A couple little nice tidbits. In 1979, he won Game 4 and drove in a run with an 8th-inning single, becoming the first player to drive in a run in his first World Series at bat. The Orioles lost that series in 7 to the We Are Family Pittsburgh Pirates, but they won in 1983 over the Philadelphia Phillies. So Stoddard, going back, his high school teammates on an Indiana State championship team included Pete Trogovich, who played at UCLA.
And actually, I could probably tell you they played on a Gary or East Chicago team. East Chicago, wasn't it? Did you have that?
Yes, I do. I do have
East
that.
Chicago, Roosevelt?
Washington. East Chicago. I figured you'd know that up in that neck of the woods.
That's why I know his name. Yeah, that's all coming back to me.
Yep. Pete Trogovich played at UCLA, and Stoddard beat his former teammate in that NCAA championship, but Trogovich won 2 of his own, sandwiching those with the Bruins in 73 and 75. And another teammate was Junior Bridgman, who went on to play at Louisville and was part of 2 Final Four teams under Denny Crum. What's neat about Junior is he's now on the board of directors for the University of Louisville, did a great job after his playing days. He's worth an estimated $160 million. He got involved with Wendy's and Chili's restaurant franchises and supposedly has over 80 of each of those. And another tidbit with him is he was part of the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar trade that brought him to the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers drafted Bridgman and then immediately traded him to Milwaukee to get Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Now, there's a close second, too, and it also has an Washington high school connection. You know, this is a player that played in the Final Four and played in the World Series, but didn't win either. And he also was a Washington high school grad out of East Chicago in Indiana.
I've probably heard the name, but I'm not going to. Yeah.
You will definitely have heard the name. It's Kenny Lofton, longtime center fielder with several clubs, most notably with the Cleveland Indians, 6-time All-Star, 5-time American League stolen base leader, 3-time Major League stolen base leader, 4-time Gold Glover, went to World Series in 75 with the Indians, in 2002 with the San Francisco Giants, but lost both times. And he played his college basketball under the great Lute Olson at the University of Arizona on a basketball scholarship. Didn't even play baseball at the college level until his junior year. A lot of times if you were recruited on a basketball scholarship, they wouldn't let you play the other sport. This happened to Tony Gwynn as well at San Diego State. His coach would not let him play baseball until after his junior year when he, for some reason, they no longer have any say. And Lofton made the Final Four in 1988, losing to Oklahoma in the semifinals. That Oklahoma team then lost to Larry Brown's Kansas Jayhawks. That completes the conversation because, as we ended the conversation the other day, Larry Brown is the only coach to win both an NCAA and National Basketball Association title.
Good stuff.
It's all kinds of fun stuff out there when you got the Google sphere to look things up. So thanks everybody for joining us. This has been your weekly Razorcast. Join us again on Tuesday for our weekly Trogcast, which is all things NCAA basketball. We'll be back next Thursday with a lot of exciting news, that Nova game and the Georgetown game on our weekly Razorcast. And until then, we say as always,
go Muskies!